Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Therapist Theater. My name is Josh Treese, and I'm a marriage and family therapist coming to you from Music City, USA, where I have a private therapy practice. I also host this podcast where we take a look at relationships and mental health through the lens of movies, TV, and pop culture. Thanks so much for downloading today's episode. Make sure you subscribe so that you won't miss any future episodes, and while you're doing that, help the show out by giving it a 5-star rating and review in the podcast app. I want to talk about the subject of our show today. Have you ever lost someone or something that you love? Then maybe you know what it's like to feel grief. Grief is such a tricky emotion to fully embrace and process and allow yourself to experience. It's an emotion that, for the most part, no one teaches us how to interact with, and it's one that we typically run away from. Today's guest, Amie Steinbach, is a pre-licensure therapist living in Ohio, and she chose the movie P.S. I Love You from 2007 to bring to the theater. Here's the IMDb synopsis if you need it. A young widow discovers that her late husband has left her 10 messages intended to help ease her pain and start a new life. Ready to jump in? Me too. Let's dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater.
All right. Well, Amie, welcome so much. Thank you for being in the theater with me.
Thank you, Josh, for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I am so stoked. So I'm sure that I don't know, maybe people can tell, but we are doing this remotely. I'm in Nashville, and where are you at?
I am in Columbus, Ohio.
Columbus, Ohio. Is there anything that Columbus, Ohio is famous for?
Ooh, that's a good question. I've been here for about 5 years, so I would say probably the thing that I've discovered is that we're really known for our restaurants, and of course, Ohio State, OSU. But the restaurants here are unbelievable. There's just so much variety. I mean, you can go anywhere and get whatever you want. It's great.
Wow. Is it like, so somebody said something to me, who was this? Oh, I had a friend in town the other day who had just come from a visit to New York City, and he was comparing and contrasting New York City to where he lives in Fort Collins, Colorado, and said that the reason why places get really good at food is because they have a really good, uh, diverse cultural presence in the town.
That is very
Do
true,
you
and
have that where you're at?
I have really discovered that this is a very big artsy city, is kind of how I like to describe it. And apparently, Columbus is known for being a test market. So a lot of restaurants come in and actually try things here. They've had, I think, Man versus Food has come here a whole lot to test things out.
Oh,
So yeah, I would say Columbus is very, very well known for that.
huh. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I would not have pegged Columbus for that.
Yeah,
I
I
think the only
never.
place I've been to in Ohio is Dayton.
Oh yeah, that's about yeah, I have been there a couple times. That's about an hour. I think it's like about an hour north of here.
Oh, okay. Well, I just kind of know from the little bit that we've chatted beforehand that you did your grad work down here in Nashville. What took you up to Ohio?
Yeah, I really wanted to get back closer to family. I'm originally from upstate New York, and so my mom lives here in Columbus, and that was really nice to get back closer to her.
Nice. Very cool. Well, so I like to start out every episode with just a question of why therapy. Why is it that you do what you do?
I absolutely love that question. It's such a hard question to answer sometimes because there's so many answers to it for me. But I would really say for me, why therapy is because I've always been a people person. I just love being around people and I love being out and about and just, I'm curious. I am incredibly curious about how people's personalities work, what their values are, things like that, and just, how they form that into who they are. So when I actually went first to college, I actually went for humanities, and I kind of went the route of sociology, psychology, classes like that because I found them so intriguing. And the more I took them and the more I learned, I was like, God, this is so fascinating. I really love learning about people. And really, for me, as I got more in depth with that, um, I just discovered like different books about self care, different books about personalities, and just everything of kind of learning how um, people tick. Is kind of how I like to put it. And really from there, I kind of my journey is really interesting actually. I kind of took a break from that field. I kind of went into communications and a little bit more with like public relations and stuff like that. So I kind of stayed in the realm of working with people and enjoying the realm of people in that sense. And then what really I think did it for me is I ended up going into my own business for a little while doing wedding planning. And
Oh.
wedding planning is very you see a lot of different dynamics is how I like to describe it.
I'd say that's fair. I think that going through the process of us planning our wedding, it definitely brought out what I would call different dynamics in us. Yeah.
Yes. And, not only do you see, I mean, like when I was doing wedding planning, I planned the whole thing from like start to finish. So I got to work with, mother of the brides, the whole family. I mean, everybody as a whole. So you see all those dynamics within themselves. And it was completely fascinating for me. And while I did that, I also did some nanny work. So I was a nanny, working with, again, being intermingled right into the family dynamics. So after a while, I started thinking to myself, I'm like, you know what? I'm like, there is something about this that really sparks my interest. I want to see what kind of like programs are out there for counseling because everybody kept telling me, "Oh, you're so easy to talk to." I can talk to you about anything, and it started clicking for me. So I reached out and kind of looked at, a couple different universities in Nashville. I looked at Lipscomb. I also looked at Trevecca, and I found Trevecca, and I loved it. I loved everything about the program. I loved everything about um, what they did and what they stood for. So really for me that was probably the biggest thing was just kind of being intermingled into relationships and family dynamics that got me that much more intrigued. Um, but I also do believe a huge part of it was my own therapy process. So being on the other side, I've been on both sides of the chair. I've been a client and I've also been a therapist. And I think that really helped me to kind of understand and discover a richer, deeper part of myself when I was on the other side of the chair. And it really helped me in my life to understand who I am and what I wanted to continue striving to be. And it was hard, it was messy, but yet such a beautiful thing for my life. And then I discovered that I really wanted to be a part of that for somebody else.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So kind of you out of what you were given and the gift that you got out of that, you wanted to also give.
I did. I really wanted to be part of someone else's inner journey.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy being a part, like a co-captain. I like to call it being like a co-captain of the ship being their life, and I'm the co-captain riding alongside of them, and I'm giving them the tools, the resources, all these things. And what I enjoy the most about it is being able to empower my clients and say, "You have all the answers. I
Mm-hmm.
am just here to help you find them inside of you." And I think
Yeah.
that, like that, discovering that on my own, being a client, just was like, oh my gosh, I really want to do this. This seems so fulfilling. I really want to be a therapist.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of kind of, you know, the old standard in school of process versus content. Um, None of us have any problem bringing content to a session. That's kind of all the stories and kind of the subject of conflict and things like that. But really, what is most helpful in a session and ultimately what a therapist is going to contribute is getting into process. Not what's the argument about, but how are you arguing? Is there a better way to do it? Um, and you know, I think really process is what changes people, because I don't think that after years of therapy myself and after being a therapist, it's not that I don't get into arguments. Of course I do.
Mhm.
It's just now I know a different way to do it, and now I've processed my own stuff enough to where I don't get uh, triggered by the same things, or maybe in the same way, because I still definitely get triggered. But
Yeah, and that's what I love about it is the process. It's not so much us being able to tell our clients what to do, because I know that that's one of the big things that I did when I first came into my own therapy process. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm here. You need to tell me what to do, how to get my life, back in balance." And she's like,
mm-hmm.
"No, that's not what we're supposed to do."
Yeah, which I guess could be like the stereotype when it comes to therapists is a client asking a question and then the therapist saying, "Well, what do you think?"
Mhm. Yep, and I
That
I
kind of
love
thing.
that. And that's where the empowerment comes in, where we're basically like, giving them questions to be able to think about stuff. And when I did all of that in my own journey, it just really made me want to do it for somebody else.
I I, I've been confronted by one of my own biases. I had a bias. I know when I was in grad school that you can't be a good therapist without going to therapy. And I've met a couple of guests through the show that actually are incredibly brilliant therapists that had not gone to therapy before they started studying it to become it. And so,
Mm.
I guess in the case of most biases, it's really not true, and it's really more about me than it is about
Yeah,
them,
yeah. And it really, I think it,
because I've definitely been proven
right.
wrong.
And I think it really depends on the person too. But I definitely believe that doing my own therapy not only helped me discover a huge piece of myself in my life, but also really got me starting to think about, what it would be like to be on the other side and helping somebody else get to where I got to.
Hmm.
Yeah, it is so rewarding. Yep.
Very cool. Well, what movie did you bring for us to talk about today?
I chose P.S. I Love You. Have
Oh
you seen
boy,
it?
did you? Yeah. I mean, we watch all the movies before the episode, otherwise the conversation would not be as good.
True.
But Leanne and I watched it last night, and um, I want to say less than 10 minutes into it, I was already crying.
Yeah, it does
Like
that to you.
at the funeral at the beginning in the bar, and I like leaned over on the couch into Leanne, and I was like, I don't know what Amie is doing this to me for, but here we go.
Yeah, it's one of those types of movies that really pulls on your heartstrings a lot.
Yeah, to say the least. So what was it about this movie that made you want to pick it?
What I really like about this movie is not only is it heartwarming, but it is completely authentic. I just feel like there's a lot of movies out there that aren't very real, but I feel like this one just really, it's just, it plays life so authentically. Um, and I really, for me, really liked the messages that I resonated
Mm-hmm.
with in the movie as well. There was a lot of personal messages for me and just things that I had struggled with in my own life, especially with grief, which
Mm-hmm.
really was part of that's why it's so hard to watch it and not tear up, because I do believe a lot of people can relate to a lot of stuff in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I had like towards the beginning of starting the show, I had kind of envisioned maybe even having um themes or like chapters where for a month we'd look at movies that had to do with this or that. And the first one that I outlined was a series on grief. And
Hmm.
so this movie's been in my Netflix queue for like the entire year, thinking, oh, maybe I'll finally get to do that series on grief. Um, so I was kind of vaguely familiar with it, like I knew what it was about. I think maybe even from having seen the trailer, but had never seen it until I sat down to watch it for today's episode. So you mentioned, grief. You mentioned certain messages, authenticity. Was there anything in the movie that maybe specifically stood out to you?
Yeah, one of the things that really stood out to me was a very different part of the movie was the relationship between Holly and her mother, Patricia.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because of course the whole movie focuses on Holly and Jerry and her losing Jerry so early in life and trying to figure out how to move through that grief. But what I really liked a lot was the whole relationship between mother and daughter, and where that was in the beginning of the movie and where it moved to towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
There
Did
was
they ever say how long her and Jerry had been married?
they did not actually. Nope, they didn't. They really never touched on that. You kind of had to guess when watching the movie.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely showed they got together, when they were younger. I think even maybe his parents say that when she goes to visit him.
Hmm.
But I never got the sense that they were together for X amount of time.
Yeah, the only thing that they did, I know, touch on was the fact that they got married very young. I think she had said when they were 19, and then she was turning 30. So I had kind of, just figured out between
Yeah.
the movie and stuff like that that maybe they had been married for like maybe nine, eight,
Mm-hmm.
9 years, something like that. I wasn't really sure exactly how long he had been passed. He had passed since then.
Yeah.
So
So what was it about the relationship between Holly and her mom that struck true for you?
yeah, what I really loved about it was just, the fact that her mother was more, at least from what I kind of thought of when I watched the movie, she was more tough love. Like you got to move through this. You got to get through
Mm-hmm.
this. You got to, you know, you can't keep grieving and staying home and not doing anything and move on with your life. And she, really didn't agree with her on that. Said, hey mom, I really need to figure this out. And she'd say to her mom about how much she needed to kind of take the time and everything. And I think when you start to see the letters come from Jerry, you can see the frustration that her mom has so much, thinking that it's not good for her daughter, but yet it was
Mm-hmm.
part of the healing process for her.
Well, she even says that too. This is not good for
Hmm.
you.
Yep, one of my favorite lines in the movie is when she says that to her, and then Holly comes back and gives her this look like, mom, this is what I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And
Do you do you think that um, you mentioned kind of the tough love, you know, it kind of almost reminds me of Dory in Finding Nemo. Like, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep going, just keep going. Don't
e-
stop, don't stop, don't feel.
exactly. Hmm.
Um,
Yep.
have you ever encountered anybody in your time working with people that has maybe adopted that philosophy and like, or maybe even yourself, and like, how did you go about addressing that?
Yeah, I have actually. I've worked with several moms and daughters actually that have kind of been through part of that, and working through the emotions of letting their child do things the way they need to do them. Tough love is really, I feel that tough love is one of those things where we're trying to do the best that we can for the other person and trying to help them snap out of it, is how I like to call it, because we want them to feel better, right? It's like an instant fix. We just want you to feel better. So you got to snap out of it and move through it. Where some people, when I was working with certain people, I don't know how to deal with my emotions. I can't, I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to feel that. I don't want to feel the pain of the grief. I don't want to see her in pain, and they just want to fix it for him instantly. And it's not an instant fix. Grieving, as you know, the grieving process is over the course of several stages. It's not just
Hmm.
one easy, quick, I'm going to go through that and it's done. Um,
Well, and I think something that her mom said towards the end of the movie, I think rang especially true. I think they were on. I don't remember if they were back in Ireland or if they were on the bridge in Central Park, but her mom said, when you see your child going down the same road that you went down
yes, I love
and
that.
having the same life that you had, and it just, I think it speaks true to, kind of what you were saying in the beginning about noticing family dynamics, noticing systems at play. Like a lot of the kind of tough love, you just got to push through this that mom was saying wasn't necessarily because she was evaluating her daughter as an
Hmm.
individual so much as she knew, oh my gosh, I've had so much pain in my life. I can see that you have so much pain, and I desperately don't want you to hurt like I've
Yes, I don't
hurt.
want you to go through the same thing that I went through. And of course, we
Yeah.
want to do that with people that we love. I mean, we don't want to see them, endure the pain, especially mothers. I mean, they don't want to see their daughters, their sons, or anybody like go through the same level of pain that they did. And that's the beautiful thing about the movie is that she says that, and Holly resonates with that and empathizes with that. And then you see that bond, that vulnerability happen. Oh, I get it, mom. I understand. But this is what
Yeah.
I needed to do, and it's beautiful. I That's actually one of my most favorite parts in the movie is that whole walk that they take, like when she comes rushing
Mm-hmm.
into the restaurant bar and she's like, "Mom, I Jerry's gone and there's nothing I can do about it." And she tells.
She said I can't. Yeah. Oh no, wait. I'm getting it confused with the part where she was with Harry Connick Jr. The part where she says I can't feel him anymore.
Right. Yeah, that's towards the
Um.
end. But when she's talking to her mom, like just, she's crying in her arms and stuff like that. She's like, "This beautiful thing happened to me and then he died."
Yeah.
And
Yeah. That's the part. That's one of the parts where I disliked you the most for picking this movie and having to watch it.
it is the part that makes me cry every single time, because I know for me in my own life, like grief is hard for anyone, but I know for me that's a struggle that I've had. I have actually lost a lot of people very early in my life, and I lost a close
Hmm.
friend that was incredibly young, about 3 years ago. And it's just, you wonder, like, how did these things happen and why? And we want to keep asking why, instead of, like, understanding that life is just beautiful as what it is, and sometimes people are leave our lives, you know for whatever reason.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think one thing that I liked about um, the relationship with mom in the movie is that there had been not a cutoff,
Hmm.
but certainly a
Yes.
conflict wherein and I'm thinking that I think it was after the part where her three girlfriends and her mom came to the apartment, but at some point mom had just been like, this is silly, this is
I
no
need to
good for
stop.
you, you got to
Hmm.
quit it. And then they kind of they didn't talk for a hot minute, but then when things got um I would just say, more distressful for her. Like when the feelings of grief kind of swelled up like a wave, she went running straight to
Hmm.
mom. Which I think is just a beautiful example of, like, it was okay to be mad, but they weren't cut off. Because in the end, she knew, mom is safe, mom is okay. Like, mom loves me. I need mom.
Right, that mom will always be there. And that was the thing is I mean, there were just, when I say that there were so many different things intertwined in this movie, you have grief, you have somebody who's struggling with those feelings of abandonment, from her own father leaving her life at such an early age. So that goes right into that because grief, can be for anything, whether it's a death or whether it's somebody leaving their life suddenly, by choice. And that's what I enjoyed about the movie the most is that it had all these different things combined into it.
Yeah, and you even got the sense from a question that she asked her mom. And once again, I can't remember whether it was Central Park or in Ireland, but do you ever think we're going to see Dad
Yeah.
again? And her mom was like, "Oh no, no, honey, no." And you just kind of got the sense of she has probably not fully grieved her dad leaving,
Right.
even though that was 16 years in the
Right.
past.
So for her, it was, you could see the struggle of her not being able to grieve over her dad, why she was having such trouble grieving over Jerry. Yeah. And I really
Yeah.
loved when she
What?
said that. She's like, you have to stop waiting.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think? Do you think so? I'm kind of two minds about that because I feel like there's certain cases where the waiting is
Hmm.
hope, and there's certain cases where the waiting is a fear to let go.
Right. Right.
How do you know the difference?
That's a good question. Um, I've really wondered about that myself, and I went every time I watch the movie because I actually own it. I love it that much. I own it.
That seems like a glutton for punishment,
Yes,
but
it
yeah.
is. But every time I watch it, I learn something a little bit more when I watch it, which is the great part. But I think if I had to put my finger on it for the actual movie, I think it was the latter, where she's like, you have to learn and stop waiting so you can be able to let go and move on with your life, which is what Jerry wanted her to do. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, that's a tough question right there. And it's it's hard. It's really hard because the waiting, you want to be hopeful. Like a person wants to be
Hmm.
hopeful and know that that person is going to come back if in her case with her father. But with Jerry, she knew he's not coming back. I desperately want him to come back, but he's not. So it was that learning how to let go, which is a difficult thing for all of us to be able to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that the movie certainly reminded me of because it's something that I know that I had to learn to do in my therapy and that I spend a lot of time helping clients to come to terms with. And it's just that I think that grief is not taught well by anybody. Like I'd like to say by our parents, but I think by anybody. Grief is something that I feel like, you know, typically people
It's a
run
dark
from.
cloud that a lot of people want to run
And
away from. Hmm. Yeah.
yeah, and so it's not like, we as, younger people or adults get in situations where someone or something that we care about that we love is gone and we know how to process it and we know how to move forward. I think a lot of times it feels like, we have just been plopped down in the middle of a maze without seeing how we got there and we do our best to stumble and try to move forward in order to get out of it, but ultimately we just have no idea.
Yeah, we don't understand the depth of what grief really is and how going through each stage is so important for a specific reason. I mean, and I kind of when I watched the movie again just a couple days ago actually, before we got a chance to talk, I was kind of trying to figure out which stage in the movie she was going through the grief, so you have
Mhm.
anger, bargaining, depression, and it was really interesting. She kind of flipped back and forth between them all. You don't really go through one concrete stage and then finish it and on to the next. It
Mhm.
really.
Which that was something that I just learned in school because I thought they were
Hmm.
sequential. And so um and I think if I'm remembering the name right,
Yes, yes, her
Kubler-Ross
five
model,
stages of
something like
grief.
that. Yeah.
Hmm.
Mhm. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression,
Yep.
acceptance. I think it was in Dr. Hopkins' class that she was like, yeah, and a lot of times we used to think, hey, this is a sequence. You move through these in order, but what we're finding is you don't really. They're just five things that happen in the
Right.
process.
And sometimes one
Um,
can come, sometimes the last, like one towards the very end can be one of the very beginning ones. It can go back and forth so many times. Mhm.
and I would even say you could move in and out of acceptance. Like
Yes.
just because you hit acceptance doesn't mean that you're done,
Right.
because you could wake up the next day and the pain of loss is especially acute, and all of a sudden you don't want to accept it that day.
Yeah, you definitely move in and out of them, because you can go through acceptance for like a week, and then something can happen that will, trigger you, remind you of that person, and then you're right back to anger or depression. And I think that's
Yeah.
what Holly was going through in the movie, was enduring, was the flip back and forth, like I'm okay, and no, I'm really not okay. I'm mad. I'm angry. Like, why did God take my husband?
Mm-hmm. And then I also think that, even in times in grief where maybe you're not acutely feeling the pain, it may not necessarily be because you're in acceptance. It could be because, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but because you're distracted.
Hmm.
Like I'm thinking of when she was on the boat with her two friends, smiling, laughing, carrying on, and then her friends both said, I'm pregnant, and the other one said, I'm getting married. And all of a sudden it was this like
It hit her.
gut
Yeah.
gut pain of, oh my gosh, you know, their lives are moving forward
And mine is
and
not.
mine isn't.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and that part in the boat was a really fantastic scene because it really hit her. And then of course, from that she, took, I mean, after they got back from Ireland and everything like that, she really took time to kind of dive into her own self, not only for what Jerry wanted her to do, but also for the fact of like, I need to figure out how to handle this. I can't handle my two friends moving forward, and I'm trying to figure
Mm-hmm.
out how to do so.
Yeah.
Eh,
Um, One thing that kind of stood out to me in the movie, and I think it's because I didn't feel like it was, or maybe I just missed it, or didn't feel like I understood it, was it seemed like there was a really stark contrast between her personality at the beginning when her and Jerry were having the argument. It looked like maybe they were coming home from a party.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you'd see a flashback of like when they met on the road in Ireland,
Yeah,
and she was very kind of like whimsical and dreamy and
carefree.
awestruck, and
Hmm.
yeah, and I thought Leigh-Ann said something about like, oh, she's so different, and I said, oh yeah, maybe something will happen that kind of breaks her and makes her cynical, and he's kind of the reminder
Who
of,
she was.
the carefree parts of her. But I never really saw that, and yet there was just kind of a stark contrast between who she was at the beginning, and I think she got back to that person by the end.
And that was, I feel like when I watched the movie, that was like the whole purpose of the movie, and for him, because he wanted her to remember who she was, who the girl that he fell in love with, who she was in love with, in herself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with life, how life happens and everything like that, she forgot who she was, and he wanted to remind her. And that was such a great part of the movie, was getting back to that carefree, whimsical person who had all the creativity and all the answers inside of her in the beginning. And then just Jerry's letters and Jerry's reminders and memories brought her back. It was such a big contrast from the very beginning to that piece.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think that one of the ways that, that kind of manifests itself is that she would oftentimes, at least at the beginning, talk about plans. You need a plan. Things just can't happen. You can't just assume it'll work out and move forward. And he was a little more, at least at that point in time, kind of a laissez-faire, kind of take it as it goes type of person.
Hmm.
And then, you go back to that flashback on the Irish road, and he's a very similar person, but she was kind of that, oh, I don't really have a plan.
Right.
And even really embracing it. Like when they part on the road, he starts to say, oh, I'm playing at this certain pub, and she kind of stops him and says, "No, no, 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 no. If I happen to walk into that exact one, then we'll know, you know,
Yeah, the
that we're
destiny.
meant to be."
Right, and that's such a fun part of the movie. Like if it's meant to be, I will see you there and everything like that.
Hmm.
Yeah, that there was no
Meanwhile, I'm just thinking, "Give me back my jacket."
Yeah, yeah. Give me back the jacket so I can, yep. Yeah, and I really love that. I love that part, just the part where they're actually one of my favorite parts in the movie is actually where they're sitting at the stone wall, which is what he called his fort.
Hmm.
And she's reading that letter and she's going back to that part in time and he reminds her of this beautiful girl who she is that he met and was carefree and loved life and yeah, it's such a great part of the movie right there. I really liked there's just so many parts of this movie that I really enjoyed. I even really liked I love the relationships between her and her girlfriends, Michelle and Sharon. Very different. Yeah.
Danielle?
Michelle and Sharon, or oh no, Denise. Oh, I'm
Denise.
sorry, I'm thinking about
Denise,
Denise and Sharon.
Sharon,
There we go. Yes,
and then I can't the blonde one that came from Australia. It was like Kara
Kiara, her
or yeah.
sister. And then there was Daniel. Daniel was the bartender, the one that liked her so much and was unfortunately in
Hmm.
the friend zone for the whole entire movie.
Yeah, it got to that end part with him, and I when they were at Yankee Stadium, and I like literally said, "Oh, I don't like this at all. They have not given us any reason or like shown us anything that they have connected over."
hmm
And then when they like kiss and they were like, "Ew,"
Yeah.
like brother, sister, whatever, I was like, "Okay, good, good. It's just not going to end with a nice little tied up bow. She gets a guy at the end to kind of fill that hole." I like
I
that.
know, isn't that the best part? I mean, because most movies, they end with your happy ending and the guy gets the girl and
Hmm.
everything like that. But with this one, yeah, I really appreciated the director for ending the movie like that because that's what makes it so real. Is it's
Hmm.
not always a happy ending like that. But the happy ending for her was finding herself, and that was the beautiful part.
Yeah,
hmm
yeah.
So
So you said that you really liked her girlfriends. What was
yes.
it about
Yeah,
that that?
I love each girlfriend that she had was just such a unique, different kind of type of personality. And you first hand you have Denise, who Lisa Kudrow plays, and she's this spunky, sassy, friend who tells it like it is and is it the funniest part of the movie is she's in search for like the perfect guy and checking all the boxes and everything like that for her own love life and then you have Sharon who is more of your I would say more of your nurturing but also has that kind of sassiness flair about her but she's very caring and I kind of got the feeling that even though they were both really close, I felt like Holly was a little bit closer with Sharon more than Denise
Hmm.
in a different
It could have been just a similar life stage thing, like her
Mhm.
and Sharon were both married.
Right.
Denise was still on the hunt.
Yes, definitely. What I really enjoyed was just the different, how we saw different scenes of Denise with Holly and then Sharon with Holly, especially when I think you saw some of the anger come out from the grief when she was watching these two. I can't remember. I don't know if they told the names or not, but it was she had just come back from work and they were showing the apartment to a couple. And right then and there, she saw something spark, and it just sparked her anger in her. And
Yep.
Sharon sitting there trying to calm her down in the moment, but you could just see the different dynamics. But I really loved that through it all, her friends were really there for her, like understood each place that she needed to be, even if it was difficult for them.
Yeah, and even went along with it. I mean, I would say, for Jerry to have written these letters, especially in the state that he was in, and these weren't like local scavenger hunt type things. I mean, one of them was he had already purchased a trip to Ireland for her, for her friends to go along with that just shows the depth of the love that they had for
Right, for
her.
his girlies, as he called it, the girlies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was really neat where how he wrote a letter, when they get there, he wrote a letter for each one, of what how he knew how their relationship worked and what he thought would be
Mm-hmm.
meaningful for each one of them.
I think probably the funniest line in the whole movie for me was at that part where Denise and Sharon got their letters, and then Holly was like, "Oh, I didn't get a letter," and Denise just said, "Well, clearly he loved me more than
Yeah,
you."
yeah, that was a great part. Yep, I really liked that.
Yeah, we're in Ireland because of you, but you didn't get a letter,
So
so
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, that's, and that's the part of the movie that you really see a lot of the relationships between, the three of them. And actually one of my favorite parts outside of the Ireland scene was when Denise is trying to get a hold of her, because she's her Holly's her maid of honor, and she's not replying. And Denise has said, hey, just so you know, you're not going to be my maid of honor anymore. And so she shows up at the bridal shop, and she's expressing her sincere apologies, and she pretty much says to her, I can't remember exactly how she says it, but she's like, is it because we were moving on and you're not? And she said, yes, it is. That is the reason
Yeah.
why.
I mean, she was very direct and confrontational. She even said something about, oh, something where the attention isn't going to be on
Yes,
you.
that's it right there. I was trying to remember exactly what she said, but yeah, the attention's not on you anymore. Was that the reason why?
Mm-hmm.
And instead of Holly being defensive or anything, reactive or anything like that, I mean, she knew. Yep, that is the
Mm-hmm.
reason, and I'm so sorry. And you just saw this beautiful vulnerability and connection right there. Like this, like each person sad for the situation, but be vulnerable and then come together. I love that. I,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big advocate for Brene Brown with vulnerability. And
Yeah, well, who's not?
yes, yes, absolutely love her. And I think a lot of
I
that
will
plays.
say, like, I have therapist shame that I have not watched her Netflix special
Oh,
yet.
you have not? Oh,
Um,
it's so great.
I haven't. It's in my queue. It's in my queue. But like, I have literally had clients who have referenced it and be like, "Have you watched it?" And be like, "No, not yet." And I just get this sense of like, "Oh, I hope they're not thinking like, well, looks like I am now the master and you are the student," kind of thing.
It is a fantastic Netflix. I highly recommend it. Yes. Yep. Um,
I did listen to an episode of Russell Brand's podcast where she talked about her process of making it and why certain things were. But
mhm.
yeah, I'll watch it.
Yeah, but I think that's what I really like about the movie the most is just all this different kind of aspects of vulnerability, especially between Patricia and her daughter Holly, where you see in the beginning her with that tough love and the hard shell of like, I don't want to watch my daughter go through this, and then watching her go through the stages of grief, and then at the very end allowing herself when Holly came to her when she needed her the most, allowing herself to be vulnerable and share her story of why she needed to move on and how she could as well from being what we
Yeah.
would call quote abandoned, in whatever sense that was for them
Yeah.
both.
My one of my therapists when I was a client, I think I said something in a session one time about abandonment or fear of abandonment or something along those lines. And she stopped me and she said, getting left. And I was like, "What?" And she said, "Getting left." She said, "An adult can't be abandoned. Abandoned means that you're left and you can't take care of yourself.
Mm.
An adult gets left." And I was like, I think the first thing I thought was like, that's not the point.
Yeah, yeah.
but like, but, but I mean, like, looking back on it and reflecting, I can
I like
see,
the reframe.
I think, yeah, I think when she was saying that, I think I was in a little bit of a place of self pity, which is like, I don't want to feel my sadness. You feel it for me.
Hmm.
Um, and then just her kind of, highlighting, an exceptional outcome of, yes, of course it hurts when somebody exits our lives, but also you are very capable and you can care for yourself and you can deal with this. Like you're not left in the lurch. You're not, a puppy left on the side of the street. Um, and so I think even just kind of highlighting that, hey, you're not in a don't feel, but like you're an adult. Like you can do this. You're capable.
Yeah, and you can see, how much, I mean, you even wonder, like when you watch the movie, you even wonder, well, has Patricia even like fully gone through her grieving process? Because you could even still hear the
Mm-hmm.
anger in her voice. Well, it's so easy being left by choice, isn't it? Instead. And you
Mm-hmm.
can tell just then and there, well, maybe she's still, after all these years, maybe Holly's grief brought up those emotions for her, watching her go through it, and brought up all those
Mm-hmm.
maybe emotions that she hadn't necessarily worked through.
Yeah, and I think to me that was highlighted by when they were on their walk at the end, and Patricia did start to talk about, her ex-husband and said how much he could make her laugh. And Holly said, "Oh, I don't ever remember you laughing."
Yeah, and she said, "Well, that
And you
makes
could
me sad that you don't
yeah,
remember."
and you could even see like the shock on her face when Holly said that. Um and then, of course, when they take their trip to Ireland, Holly said it, I want to help my mom laugh again.
Hmm.
Which I thought was just this incredibly beautiful uh, type of love that's very specific. Like I know you specifically, and I'm loving you specifically.
Yeah, it was such a
You know.
beautiful moment of just watching a mom and daughter understand each other and what each other mean, to each other, and just the love that's there, that unconditional love of, I get it, I get you.
Hey, everybody! I want to let you know all of the places that our community, which is still in need of a name, can be found online. First and foremost, there's the podcast, which you are currently listening to. Obviously, you found it on the podcast app that you're listening to it on, but you can also subscribe and listen on Spotify, Pandora, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Overcast. Next, we've got a Twitter. Check it out at twitter.com, username at Therapist Theater, THTR. So THERAPIST, THTR. After that, we've got an Instagram. You can find us in the Instagram app at Therapist Theater, all spelled out that time. Finally, you can find us on YouTube by searching Therapist Theater. And if you want to drop us a line via email, just send it to therapisttheater@gmail.com. In fact, why not email in your best suggestion for what our community should call ourselves? Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago for my birthday, Leigh-Ann had like for the entire day had this like secret plan and drove me from point A to point B and had these things arranged. But like one of them was I have an obsession with corgis and follow many of them on Instagram.
Hmm.
And she had found one in Nashville and had contacted the owner. And so she took me to a dog park and I got to play with this corgi that I followed on Instagram. And, I think either at the end of the day or a couple of days later, she was like, I wish I could have done more for your birthday. Did you like your birthday? And I was like, I have never felt more loved in my entire life in a specific, just for me way than I did on my
Oh,
birthday. Like, I felt more known than I ever have before.
hmm.
Um, and that's such a powerful type of love that I think shows intimacy and it just shows connection and attunement that that's the kind of love I think that heals.
It is. And I really do believe in life, like when we're more connected to ourselves, we can be better connected to others.
Yeah.
And I,
Which is a great aspect of the movie is
yep,
that like it
yep.
it does lead her to a place of connecting more with
Hmm.
herself.
Yep, and that's exactly what what Jerry had wanted her to do was to reconnect with that part of herself that she had lost so that way she could find the happiness and be able to connect, more with the people that are around her. Yeah, that's why I was saying it has so many different messages in the movie, where some movies they just have like one or two. This one has just so many different pieces to
Mm-hmm.
it.
Let me ask you this: like the last letter that Patricia had
Hmm.
for her, I I didn't I didn't get this like overtly, but maybe it was. Do you think that he gave her the last letter kind of as a, keep your eye on her, and when she gets to this place, then give her, not physical place, but like when she gets to this place in the process, then give her the letter?
I I do. I think there was definitely a meaning behind it. I also like to believe that there was the meaning of he knew that there was conflict and between the two of them. And I think
Mm-hmm.
for him, he also thought maybe it would be a healing process for the two of them in their relationship as well. I kind of, with that one, I kind of felt that when I watched it. So I want to say yes to that. And then I think it was a little piece of that as well.
Yeah.
Because I think he knew, even though from what I got, they don't really touch on it too much into the movie, but you kind of gather on that, Jerry and Patricia kind of had a little bit of a rocky part of the relationship, them getting married
Oh,
so
even
young.
the tape at the beginning, like he says something about her mom, and then he goes like, "Oh
Sorry,
crap, is she in the
Patricia.
room?" And yeah, yeah, and she kind of, yeah,
Yeah. So
huh,
I often, think that it might be just a piece of him understanding that the relationship was a little bit rocky and that he wanted to be part of the journey for them to also get to a healing place too.
yeah,
But yeah, it's that, I think he understood too that with Patricia going through her own stuff, and if you remember in the beginning of the movie, he had mentioned to her, "I'm not your dad." And so
oh yeah, like when are you gonna
that I'm not
realize
your
that
dad.
I'm not gonna leave, that I'm not
Yeah,
gonna,
and if you
yeah,
think about that, I think that also plays into what you just said at the end of the movie. So he understands that Patricia went through all of that when Holly was young. And so I do believe with her having the letter at the end, that was again all of that meaningful wrapped into like one little place for her to it was
yeah,
pivotal. I thought it was a really great pivotal moment for her to have the letter at the end because it wrapped up everything right into one right there.
mm-hmm, yeah, yeah. That I felt like that little line that he had at the beginning about "I'm not your dad,"
So
like
powerful.
when he said it, like I missed it. I was biting into a fish taco at the time, and I had to with like a mouthful. I was like, "Wait, what did he say?" And then I had to like rewind it really quick because I kind of thought that I heard him say that, but I wasn't sure. And then I just thought, "Oh, that's a thread that's going to connect." Um, and that I think is so it's so true in a general sense, and yet it's kind of like a Trojan horse in the sense of I think that so many times there's things in our present that connect to things in our
Hmm.
past that bring feelings from the past into the present that we don't realize what's going on. I remember reading a book many years ago. I think it was called um, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, something along those
Oh, I
lines.
haven't I haven't heard of
The
that one.
author was Peter Scazzaro. Um, and he called it Scazzaro. He called it an emotional allergic reaction. Emotionally healthy. Shoot. And he said it's when something in the present um, triggers a memory of something in the past. It's like all of the emotions that we hadn't dealt with from the past move forward, and like when you get a king in checkers, just stack on top of the present moment. And he said that's why a lot of times, you'll be with somebody who clearly has been triggered, and
Yes.
the response that they have is so proportionately
Yes.
larger
Mhm.
than what it is that's going on in the moment. It is emotionally healthy spirituality. Yes. Cannot recommend it enough. It was great. My therapist at the time when I told him about that, he called it compounding emotions. But in either case, Scazzaro kind of outlined in his book, you know, when you begin to work through it, eventually you could get to the point where you could say, hey, when you said this, it reminded me of that. And when I'm reminded of that, this is what happens inside of
Yeah, and
me.
we all
And
have
it's
it.
not,
We all have them.
yeah. And it's not asking, it reminds me of boundaries. It's not telling the other person what you can and cannot do. Never use that word again, but it's letting them know, it's giving them a behind the curtain peek. Here's what goes on in my heart when I'm reminded of that, and it's reaching out, and it's connecting, and it's sharing intimacy.
Yeah, it's part of all that vulnerability of like, I just want you to know that it's not you. It's part of my past coming in. And that's why when people are afraid of triggers, actually triggers are like one of the most beautiful, helpful pieces to endure and to, you know, look at straight in the face because they teach us some of our past stuff that maybe hasn't necessarily been touched or healed and allows us the opportunity to look at them and say, hmm, okay, that's why that's happening. That's why that's coming back. And you definitely
Hmm.
saw that in that moment when he said that because of the fact that she was still, as you said earlier, grieving the loss of her dad and hoping that he will
Hmm.
come back years later. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think triggers are a
And I
beautiful
think,
thing, actually.
yeah. And I think they're a beautiful thing to
Yeah.
observe.
Yeah, I would agree.
They're always tough when it's you, when you're the one getting
Yeah,
triggered.
that is very true.
I think I think that, like, when it comes to a parent, any kind of primary attachment figure, like a parent of a child or a spouse, that type of loss is so much more difficult to
Mhm.
process, especially because as children, hopefully, these are in the case of parents, these are the people that we would turn to for comfort in dealing with, these types of losses. And then to have that same kind of pain be caused by one of the
Right.
comforters it's tough. I
Yeah.
mean, it would be tough for an adult to get their head around that, much less a
Yeah,
kid.
it goes right back to your theory of attachment. I mean, and in Holly's case, I mean, my dad left me, I don't want you to leave me too. You know, it's just that was her
Hmm.
trigger was, oh my gosh, I don't want someone that I love, this man that I love to leave me like the man that I love, my father, left me as well.
And she jumped straight to that when they were in their argument at the
Hmm.
beginning. I don't know if it was an argument, but when they were coming home and she had said something, he said something around her mom, like she wasn't ready to have
Yes.
kids. At one point, when he kind of like stands back up to her, she jumped straight to like, or what? Or you're going to
Yep.
leave me? And he was like, that's it's never been an option. No, of course not.
Yeah, and that's exactly when she was getting triggered in the moment. Yeah, it's incredible how when we're in conflict or just how it's just so unconscious. It just comes up so quickly, and then when we take a step back to think about it, then we realize what just happened. It just comes so quick.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the mm, yeah, I'm going to call it danger. I think that's the danger in unprocessed grief and
Hmm.
trauma, is because you kind of exist in this hyper vigilant state of expectation that, this thing is going to happen again, even if it's not in the same relationship or the same type of relationship. You're kind of just still, you're still in that emotional state, and it kind of, I had a friend many years ago who described it as, he said something happened between me and my dad when I was 8, and I developed this what did he call it, like worldview or like belief that um, every relationship would operate the same way. And he
Ah,
said, now I'm in my early 30s and I have been living according to that belief for the past 20 something years. And he goes, now what I'm realizing is, in effect, when it comes to decisions in relationship, that I have been letting an 8-year-old make all of my relational decisions.
mm,
As if I walked, down the street and saw a random 8-year-old and said, "Hey, what do you think I should do about should I marry my girlfriend or not?"
yeah.
And then the 8-year-old gets to make that call.
Mhm.
And he goes, I'm saying that out loud and it sounds silly, but in my heart, it's it's because of this belief that I developed 20 something years ago about how people would treat me or how relationships work. And I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah, and
And it was all from this hurt that he had as a kid that he had not
yep,
processed.
and I can't remember the quote that I read one time, but there was a beautiful quote out there that I had seen about something about the relationships, something about the relationships that were in mirror for us, the things that haven't healed that we need to work on. And it's so true. I really do believe that
Hmm.
the partners that we choose in life are definitely a mirror for us, and the triggers that unfortunately do happen are that aha moment, no matter how painful they are, of something inside of us.
Yeah. What else? Is there anything else from the movie that jumps out at you?
The those were like the big things for me that I really liked about the movie. I did find I'd be curious to see what you think about the relationship between Daniel and Holly. I found that like they all, all the people, all the characters in the movie definitely relate to all the different messages, but I thought it was really interesting the relationship between Daniel and Holly.
Mm-hmm.
And how even in that one, I mean, because each so you have with Patricia and Holly, you have the that piece of being left. And then you have with Holly and Jerry that piece of being left, but you also have it with Daniel and Holly. So you have it, he gets it two times because I don't know if you remember in the movie when they're in, I can't remember exactly where in the movie that it is, but he's talking about his fiance that left him. I think it's in the
It's
closet.
towards the
Okay.
end. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's
There's parts
either
of it in the
it's
closet.
no, I think it's they're at a
Okay.
booth. Yeah, they're at a booth, and then I think part of it. No, it's not at Yankee Stadium. I think it's when they're at that booth right before he kind of gets up and walks away.
Yeah, and they're talking about that, and he's saying, how his fiance left him, and he's like, "I wish I could be someone's Jerry," and that was in the restaurant.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yep. And if he was struggling with his own grief of being left, and then he felt, with Holly not feeling the same way about, his feelings, another, part of being left. Like, when am I going to be someone's Jerry? I thought their
Mm-hmm.
relationship was very interesting as well throughout the movie.
Yeah, I think there was a parallel between the two. I I wasn't like a fan of their
Hmm.
relationship as at I think for the majority of the movie I kind of felt like that they weren't really connecting but also kind of suspecting that a rom-com ending was going to happen where they'd end up
Yeah.
together, which when they were standing on the dugout at Yankee Stadium and they went in to kiss, I mean in my head I literally thought, "Ew."
Right.
Like they have not established a good relationship and they're going to end up together. And that's why I was pretty satisfied when they didn't, but I think in a way the story kind of ended up with Holly finding her more of herself. I think that was true for Daniel as
It
well.
was. Hmm.
Like if nothing else, it pointed to the area that he had some work to do in, because it wasn't like he got a new career out of it or he got a new girlfriend out of it. Like
Right.
it at least pointed to, oh, here's some pain that I haven't really paid attention to that I need to pay more attention to
Yeah,
now.
and that goes right back to kind of what I was saying before, that not necessarily like the partners we choose, but even the relationships that we have, whether it's, with a sibling, a friend, or whatever, are these mirrors that you just happen, and then it's reflected right on you of just some of those pieces, like you said, that need to be worked on. And that's probably what I liked the most about the relationship, that even though it didn't end up in a romantic way, they were able to connect and help each other with struggles that they each had. I mean, Daniel would point out things to Holly, and Holly would point out things to Daniel. And I think one of the most touching um, moments and quotes in the movie between them is when they're walking in the park and they pass the old couple. And I'm trying to remember what he
Mm-hmm.
says. And he says, we in life we rush and we try so hard to not, to combat the aging process and not, feel it and work through it and to embrace it, but we don't realize how much of a gift it is to age and to be with somebody that knows us thick and thin, and for all our flaws and all our strengths and weaknesses and everything. I love that part of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I'm thinking of the song that Adam Sandler sings to Drew Barrymore on the plane in The Wedding Singer.
Oh, that's right.
Um,
Oh, I haven't seen that movie in a really long
yeah,
time. I want to grow
I
old
want
with
to
you.
grow old with you.
Yep.
Yeah. I caught a little tiny, I don't know, I guess you could call it an Easter egg at one point where Holly is making these like vision boards of what she
Oh,
could be,
yes. Yep. Yep.
which all of them have a pro and a
Mhm.
con, which I
The
like.
Vampire Slayer.
But there was one for Vampire Slayer, yeah, and then the guy that played Daniel was Spike from Buffy, um, the TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
After all the times that I have watched that movie, I did not pick that up.
Yeah, James Marsters, something like that. James Marsters, yeah. He had bleach blonde hair in Buffy, so incognito in this one with the dark hair. But I caught you.
I will
I
have
caught
to
you.
go back and just pay attention to that piece of it. But no, I didn't even see that part. But the vision boards part is really funny because you hear, I love
Yeah.
that part where you can hear Jerry that, no, you can't be a vampire slayer. There's not anything, there's nothing
Mm-hmm.
like that.
But I figure they probably added that in because of him, because that was a show he was on for many
Hmm.
years.
Oh, how funny is that?
Yeah. So definitely a theme of grief when you look at this
Hmm.
movie. Um, either coming from the work that you have done with clients or your personal work or even in like, consulting or coaching, is there anything about grief um, that you think would be helpful for people to know in general?
I think if I could think of one thing, it's just allowing yourself to feel the emotions no matter how uncomfortable that they are. I think it's very easy for us to run from something that just feels awful in the moment. And
Mm-hmm.
I think if we can spend more time to feel the pain, to feel what we need to feel instead of running away from it, that way we're allowing ourselves to go through the whole healing process instead of pushing it for a later moment when we could get triggered again from it. So I would say
Mm-hmm.
that would be my best advice. I actually love working with grief in all facets, not necessarily death, but just I've enjoyed working with clients with divorce. Divorce is like a death. That's something that definitely
Mm-hmm.
has to go through the grieving process. All sorts of things. But yeah, that would probably be my best advice, is to allow yourself to feel in order to be able to let go.
I've even heard somebody say before, divorce is worse than death because the person that you're grieving the loss over is still
Yes, they're
around,
still there. Hmm.
still living their life, still moving forward. Um, I think there was a movie that I watched a long time ago called Out Cold. It had Zach Galifianakis in it, and there's a part at the beginning where it's clear that one of the characters in it has just gone through a breakup, and they work at a ski resort, and there's another girl that works there who has a big crush on him, and she's trying to get him to get over it, move on so that she can date him. And she says, "Oh, the rule. The rule is that you get one, it's either week or day, I can't remember, but 1 week of grieving for every month that you were together."
Hmm.
And, just kind of putting a defined time period to it. And I think, I would tell people, like, there's no
There
timeline for
is not.
grief.
Yep.
So don't let anybody pressure you into, you have to be over this in X amount of days or weeks or
Hmm.
months. It's different with everybody. Every person's different, and because of that, every relationship is different. And um, some losses are tougher than others.
Yeah, and
And
it's
so,
true. And with each stage comes a different emotion, comes a different feeling, comes, different memories, things like that. It's allowing yourself to go through the emotions in the different stages without pushing yourself for a time limit. And that's hard for a lot of people who, especially people who do have that mindset of tough love, like you need to get out of this, you need to work through this right now. And it's just that's not what the grieving process is about. It's about taking the time to work through every piece of it.
yeah. And then, you get into grieving of things that I don't know if this is the best term for it, but there are that abstract, and I think of um, maybe the parent who uh, loses a child. Not only are you grieving the loss of a person, but you're grieving the loss of the hopes and the dreams that you had for that
Yeah.
child,
Hmm.
in the future. And sometimes the abstract things are tougher to grieve.
Hmm.
Maybe you feel like, well, I don't have any right to be sad or upset over that.
Hmm.
Um, and then most of the time, that's, I don't know. I don't know about minimization, but it's certainly a way of maybe pushing the feeling away.
Yeah, like giving ourselves more
Um,
permission, you know. Hmm.
yeah.
Yep.
Hmm. So, tell me something that you have learned from your clients, from the people that you've worked with.
That is the best question. And I had to really think about that one a little bit because when I'm in the moment in the room with clients and stuff, I mean, I'm not only am I there presently with them, but there's lots of thoughts going through my head of kind of what I'm learning from them too. I would say for me, it would be four different things. The biggest one is the art and power of silence. So,
Mm-hmm.
when I first started out as a therapist, actually, when I was working with my supervisor, one of the things that she pointed out to me was that I had trouble with silence because I would always try to be filling the room with something that wasn't that. And I think for me, I was always wondering when there was too much silence, was there something wrong? Was I supposed to be saying something to break the silence? When in reality, what I learned from my clients is that all I needed to do was just be there, to just be with
Mm-hmm.
them in whatever they were feeling, whatever they were thinking. And that's it. I didn't have to say anything. And it's so
Yeah.
powerful because when we think about silence, it's, we wonder, what am I supposed to do with that? Right. So, I mean, is the other person upset? Is the other person, thinking something and I'm supposed to be saying something? But sometimes silence is just silence. And it can be such a powerful moment for the client and for the therapist. And that's what I learned, that not only is it powerful for them, but it's also powerful for me in the sense of
Mm-hmm.
what I can learn about being I can learn being a better therapist by sitting in more silence and allowing my client to digest and process what has just been talked about.
Yeah. And even, so much healing can come from just the act of sharing.
Hmm.
So just the fact that the client maybe has shared something that they never have before, we don't have to come in and package it up really nicely right away, because maybe just the act of them saying something, you know, was a powerful
Yeah, and
moment.
I feel like silence is one of those great times for our clients to be able to have the aha moment. And what I have
Mm-hmm.
learned as a therapist is that when we break that silence, we don't give them that opportunity to have that insight, that aha moment. I would say another big thing for me would be how to be a better listener. I know in grad school, we've always talked about active listening and being a listener, but you really don't understand the depth of that until you're in the room with your clients. And I've always been someone who has been pretty good at least I thought I've been pretty good at listening. But it's that active piece of listening that my clients have really taught me to that I don't have to be sitting there writing down notes of everything that they say. It's being present with them and being able to listen in that way that is the most beneficial to my clients.
Yeah, I think for me, when I started, I was scared to death that I was going to miss something.
Yes,
So I kind of I
too.
swung the other way, and I was like glued to my
Mhm.
clipboard trying to write everything
Yes.
down.
I
And one of my supervisors watching a video of me in session said like, "Oh, you're really glued to that clipboard. Like your client just shared something really scary and you didn't even look up to make eye
or we
contact with
miss
them."
it. We miss like that powerful
Yeah.
thing. And it's not that we're trying to it's not that we're doing that on purpose. It's just we just don't want to miss anything by writing down in our notes. And I
Yeah.
agree. I was doing the same thing in the very early stages, and now I have learned how to just be there and be present, that I don't necessarily have to write anything down. I just have to listen.
Yeah. I think for me it was like learning to trust
Mhm.
myself. Like that supervisor said to me like um try to trust that try to trust yourself more that you will remember what's important and I think you'll be
Yeah.
surprised,
Yep.
which was 100%
Yeah, and
true.
that's a good way to put it, is just trusting that we know what we need to hear and what we'll take from it. Yeah. So I
Hmm.
definitely believe that my clients have kind of taught me a little bit more about that as a whole. And then I would say these kind of go together for me, but definitely learning, they've taught me how to be myself in the room. That I don't have to be the perfect therapist. I don't have the answers. That sometimes if they say something to me and I just that's really tough, or I don't really, that it's okay for me to just say I don't really know. Where before I felt like I had to have the answer or something to say in response, and I've learned that I can just be myself and say I really don't know the answer to that one, but you know what? We will figure it out.
Yeah. Or sometimes even just staying on the I don't
Mhm.
know.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know, cuz sometimes there is no definitive end to that.
And that can be, yeah, that can be very empowering right there, is the I don't know.
I don't know, but I'm
Right,
with
I'm with
you.
you in the moment.
You're not alone in not
Mhm.
knowing.
Yep, we're in it together. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um and so with that, authenticity piece also brings out, and what I've learned is how to be more creative as a therapist. And that's
Hmm.
one of the things that I probably have learned the most, is what works for my clients. Not what I think will work
Mhm.
for them in an exercise, but tell me more about how you learn what works for you. And then that helps me to be able to come up with things tailored to, how they learn, how they process things. So my clients have definitely taught me how to be more creative as a therapist, when before I'd be scared to try certain
Hmm.
things.
You know what's interesting about kind of the things that you said before that, and that is, I think that when we are truly present with a
Mhm.
client and we are truly comfortable with
Mhm.
ourselves, I think it brings us to a place of, you could call it thinking on your feet, you could call it being creative, but it allows you to be there with the client and adapt and bob and weave for whatever is called for.
Yes, I like the way you put that.
Versus
Mhm.
Yeah, I think back to like when I got started, so often in my head I was running through filters of, okay, so if I'm practicing this modality, then I'm supposed to ask this, I'm supposed to move into that stage, I'm supposed to get them to do that task and, these kinds of things. Versus now, sitting in the room, knowing who I am, doing my best to be with and know who they are. There's been times where I've had a client do an experiential, type of thing. And it wasn't that I walked into the room that day thinking, we're going to do this
Right. It just came to
activity.
you.
But it was just, yeah, it was just, hey, I think this might be helpful for them to connect with what we're talking about. And if I, had something else on my mind at the time, even if it was something that I was trying to tell myself was for the benefit of the client, that type of thing may not have had the space to come in.
Yes, and that's exactly how I've felt. I mean, I've always had the creativity, but in the moment I always felt like I had to, in the beginning I had to feel like I had to come up with stuff instead of just allowing myself to be who I am in the room with the client and let the things
Hmm.
come naturally creatively to me.
Well, Amie, thank you so much for being willing to give this remote experience a shot. Um, Thanks so much for being on today. It has been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me on, and we just love what you do, and it'll be exciting to see what other movies you do in the future.
Hey, my love.
Hello.
How are you this evening?
Pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice. How was your day?
It was it was great.
Yeah,
I, did my job, made some calls, talked to some people.
that sounds magical.
Typical day in the
Yeah.
life.
We should all be so lucky.
Yeah.
So you and I watched the movie
Mhm.
P.S. I Love You.
Mhm.
Shed many a tear.
Yeah. I
And-
had seen it before.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Mhm.
I had not.
So I shed a little bit less tears.
Yeah,
Not none tears, but
yeah.
less tears.
Have you ever watched a movie where you didn't cry?
Yeah, I can't think of one right now, but Bridesmaids.
Oh, when I was living in Southern California many years ago, there was a guy that worked at the same place that I worked that started up a YouTube channel that went viral for a while, and it was that he would watch a movie with his wife in their living room and then film her immediately after because she cried at every movie. And so it would be like ridiculous movies. Like he would have her watch, I can't even think of one right now, like Spaceballs, which I think was literally one. I know that the first one she cried at was the end of Star Wars, the original Star Wars. And he filmed her watching that, and she was going on about how they gave the dog man a medal. And that was just so touching. And in a similar vein, maybe I should start a YouTube channel.
No,
And that could-
absolutely not. Also, I don't cry at like ridiculous parts. I cry at parts that a lot
Very
of people cry
appropriate.
at.
Yes,
Yeah,
appropriate crying.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
That's a skill set on my resume.
Yeah, on your LinkedIn.
I have appropriate crying.
Yeah, I would endorse that skill set on your LinkedIn, appropriate crying. So, you had a chance to listen to the interview with Amie. Tell me the things that you thought.
Well, wow, it was so great. Did you, or are you going to tell people how you and Amie got in touch?
I hadn't planned on it, but yeah, Amie.
I just thought it was cool.
Yeah, you and I were hanging out in our living room one night, as we're
Prone to do.
oft to do, and I got a notification. Amie left a wonderful comment on the show's Facebook page, and was like, "Hey, I went to Trevecca alongside these other therapists that you've had on, and I just want to let you know that I really love the show." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing! Want to be on it?"
Yeah.
Which just goes to show if you compliment the show, there's a 100% chance that you'll be a guest on it so far.
Well, for this show, I've tried it with other shows and it hasn't worked yet, but
Well, but I can't speak to other shows. I can only speak to the one I host.
Yeah. Well, anyways, I just thought it was cool that like that's how you guys got in touch, and then that she's in Ohio and you guys were able to record. I love the whole remote recording thing.
It's the tallest state.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so high in the middle.
Oh my gosh. Moving on.
Thanks, Dad.
So I guess one of the first things was, I think it was when you guys were talking about her why therapy, and you sort of got into the talk about therapists who have been to therapy and whatever. And at some point, either you or her, I think she said that like people want answers when they go to therapy. Like they want to be told what to do. And I think she even said that like when she went to therapy, that's what she wanted. And as soon as she started talking about that, I immediately was like, yup. Cause when I went, that was the same thing. Like my therapist literally at some point was like, oh, you want a manual. Like you want me to give you a book on how to do and what to do. And that's not what's going to happen. And like, also there's not an answer. And I think it's not until recently that has really sunk in as like, it's not just that person couldn't give me an answer. And it's also not just that, that therapists can't give you an answer. That's part of the beautiful thing about therapy is that it's helping you find the answers within yourself. Like it's getting to know yourself more and better, and also helping you practice like standing up for and communicating things about yourself. I had actually a conversation with someone today, and it was a mentor who has a mentee, and she was telling me about this, something that's that the mentee was processing, and then how they worked up to where they basically told a family member how they felt about something. And I was like, hold on, are you telling me that this child not only like identified that she felt something, but she worked through what she felt to the point where she could say, oh, I should probably tell this person, and then told the person. And I told the mentor, I was like, that is adult level emotional processing. Like that's so impressive. So anyways, I just think it really comes down to, and if you heard that and you thought, well, if a therapist can't give me the answers, then why would I go to them? I think challenge yourself a little bit, because it's worth it, and it helps you. I mean, ultimately you don't want to be living someone else's life. Like you don't want to be living according to someone else's answers. You want to be living according to your own.
Yeah, and they actually, they instill in us as therapists that therapy is not giving advice. And the reason why we have to go to grad school and spend so long studying is because therapy is based on technique. And the reason why that technique is there is because otherwise anything we told anybody would come from our personal experience and would be reproducing in our clients ourselves. And the goal of therapy is not for me to have my client become just like me. The goal of therapy is for me to help the client become more like themselves. And to do that, I can't just say, oh, here's exactly what you should do, because what if what you would do is totally different than what I would do?
It probably is.
Yeah. That's okay. That's great. That's why we have so many different types of people. Somewhere around 7 billion different types, and that's why a lot of times, it's pretty stereotypical in like a movie or something for a client to ask a question to a therapist, and the therapist say, well, what do you think? I mean, it's kind of cliche.
It's kind of like, how do you feel about that?
But the reason why it's there is because that it's trying to help the client identify what's inside of them.
Yeah. When you guys were talking about like the depiction of grief, and I forget, like, I think you were saying that, in the bar there, you had like a hard time, like in the funeral, when it's, towards the beginning and it says funeral. I think for me, the biggest kicker was when she walks back into the apartment and she goes, first of all, she walks in, and that's a whole thing. Just imagining walking back into a place that is quite literally full of this person that you love who's gone. And then not only that, but when she goes and gets in the bed, and then she calls his cell phone to hear his voice on the voicemail.
Ugh.
Yeah, that gets me every single time, because I remember being long distance from you and saving your voicemails and listening to them sometimes, which, you know, I don't know. I'm not going to be embarrassed by that. I
Don't
really
be,
liked you.
same. Yeah, same girl.
So I just
Same
think,
girl, same.
yeah, that in particular was just like a punch in the heart to watch, because it's just such a raw and realistic view of somebody walking back into their empty apartment, you know, for like the first time. So I thought that was a really, I mean, similar to what Amie said. Like, she felt like this movie really realistically depicted people going, like, somebody who's grieving, that it's not just like a clean process. And I think that was one of the best, for me, like one of the best scenes depicting that very raw, like right after it happens and you're still surrounded by all of their things. Ugh, man, it hurts.
And what do you do? And I think, you know, just in my own personal life, I've heard people say before, like, you should immediately get rid of all the things. Or I've heard the opposite. You should not change a thing, keep them all. Or you should, you know, maybe box them all up and keep them with you, but not get rid of them. And like I said in the show, there's not a right. There's not a right way. There's not a right amount of time. You just have to be in the moment and feel what you feel and do what you think is right in that moment. You know, I'm blanking on the word, a cliche, I guess, a slogan in recovery is do the next right thing. So just in your grief, do the next right thing. Do the next thing that helps you.
I like that a lot. I wonder too, I mean, I think this movie, yes, like it's good to let yourself feel your feelings, and the fact that she was in her apartment and like didn't shower, and you know, when her friends and her mom come over and there's just stuff everywhere and she's like singing in a shirt and in his boxers, I think,
And suspenders.
Like, yes, that is there's not a wrong thing to do in your grief. I think this movie was a cool balance of both. Like, it showed her really sitting in it and wallowing in it, which is good and healthy. And then also her mom saying like, all right, it's time to pick yourself up, which there's also a point when I think that's a good thing to do. But I think it's so different for everyone. So there's not a...
Yeah, I think there's a delicate balance between feeling your feelings and getting swallowed alive by them. Like, I think it's possible to feel your feelings, but also continue on doing things that are healthy for yourself in your life.
I think eventually, yes. I mean, but I think that's what I like about the movie. Like, it shows for the first, I don't know, with that kind of grief. Like, I would imagine if I lost you, I don't know if I'd be able to get out of bed for a while, but I would get out of bed eventually. But I wouldn't be. Yeah, I would be swallowed by it for a time.
My funeral is on Monday and you're at work on Tuesday. I meant it's a delicate balance. Like, yes, feel your feelings, walk around in my boxers and suspenders.
You don't have
sing.
Suspenders.
But also feed yourself.
Yeah.
And also take a shower. And also don't sleep to pass time, which is a mark of depression.
Yeah.
Like, just practice self-care in your grief.
Yeah. Yeah.
And thankfully, in the moments where she couldn't do that, she had people who loved her who could help her do that.
Which I think in grief, there's probably at least early on a time when you need that.
Yeah.
Like, it might not be possible for you to shower, and that's okay. But like, reach out to people who can help you be a person.
And have a garden hose.
Yeah. The last little thing, especially like talking about the movie, was just, you guys touched on this and you and I talked about this while we were watching it. When we saw the flashbacks of her meeting her husband in Ireland, she was like a totally different character than when we first met her in the like argument. And you and I were kind of like, what is that? Like, why? What caused that? And you had said like maybe something happened that like broke her. I don't know. And then you and Amie talked about it. And it wasn't until I listened to you guys that I think it hit me. I don't think something happened to break her. My theory is that when she got married, the fear that he was going to turn out just like her dad overcame her, and she became more like controlling and fearful. And we saw that play out in the fight. Like, she had this big reaction, and then he didn't say anything. Like, he literally didn't do anything. And then suddenly she was like, so you want to just leave? Like, out of nowhere, she brought that up. He didn't even bring that up. And so that, I think that was it. Like, I think once it was like they were committed to each other, suddenly the stakes were so high, and she was like, and that fear that he was going to do what her dad did probably, I mean, this is my theory, like, changed her in the relationship. Like, she became a person in that relationship that wasn't the person that he met.
Well, because what's the natural response to fear?
It's to want to control things. Yeah. Anyways, so that's my my
really
theory.
Insightful. Yeah, I like
Thank
that
you.
theory. So here's what I'm curious about. Before we started recording, you said you had 3 things and one of them wasn't really a thing. What's the one that wasn't really a thing?
It was the saying that that I wanted answers with my therapist as well, and that's like not a.
That is a thing. All 3 of those things were very, very valid, and I'm really glad that you shared them.
Thank you. I think I felt like I was just going to be like, oh yeah, me too, which sometimes I do, and I like doing.
Yeah, and I think also sometimes me too is really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, me too. I mean, that movie is just so sad. And like, honestly, there's parts of it that, like, even thinking about the voicemail thing, like, I can't sit in that too long because I'll get really fearful and like sad, and I don't know. That's just such a heavy thing.
It's true.
But yeah, I mean, it was great. I loved it.
Well, rent, pass, or buy?
Oh my gosh, you did it in a different order that time, and that really threw me off.
No.
You usually say buy, rent, or pass.
Mm-mm.
You do.
Check the tapes.
I will check the tapes. Listeners, rewind it, check the tapes. Anyways.
No, I know what I said right then, but that's because that's how I always say it.
Anyways. I think buy and watch it on a cold night when you really want to watch like something that will both make you cry and then at the end make you feel hopeful. Or watch it over the holidays. Watch it when you're snuggled up with your significant other.
Let me ask you this. Can you watch it in reverse and it's about a woman whose husband comes back from the dead?
No.
Okay. Just wanted to check. Well, I mean, I think that we definitely nailed it on this episode.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and say that we can raise the lights, lower the curtain, and say that for this week, the theater is closed.